I never knew the sound of hooves could feel like thunder rolling straight through my bones. Yet that night on the mesa, it seemed the sky itself had fallen. Horses screamed, wagons groaned, men shouted in fear or fury, and the land burned red with firelight. I clutched the reins of my mare until the leather cut my palms raw, my throat dry as sand, my prayers thin as smoke. My name is Eliza Carter, and if you had asked me then what kept me alive, I might have told you it was luck, but the truth is, luck had abandoned me months before. The wagon train was scattered across the flats like broken teeth. Lanterns swung wildly, voices shouted to circle, to run, to shoot, but it was already too late. We were too many miles from safety, stretched too thin, and the outlaws knew it. I saw them pouring down from the ridges, faces masked with bandanas, their rifles flashing white fire in the dusk. My heart pounded so violently I thought it would break free of my chest. Smoke from the burning lead wagon stung my eyes. Somewhere to my left a woman screamed a child's name over and over, until the voice cracked into silence. I tried to steady Jack's old rifle across my knees, but my hands shook so badly the ramrod slipped, clattering to the wagon bed. It had been 6 months since Jack died. 6 months since men much like these rode into our homestead and left me with nothing but the ashes of a life. I remembered his face, slack with death, and for one desperate heartbeat I thought perhaps I was meant to join him that night. Here, under the merciless Arizona sky, a rider broke through the smoke ahead, bearing down on me with a pistol raised. His laughter was harsh, cruel, the sound of a man who lived on terror. I pulled the trigger, but forgot the primer, and the hammer fell with a hollow click. Useless. His horse's eyes rolled white, muscles pounding closer. I opened my mouth to scream, but an arrow whistled past me, straight into his chest. He toppled backward in the saddle, dead before he hit the dust. The world slowed. Out of the haze I saw them, the Apache. Shadows darting across the rocks above, their war cries slicing the chaos. Arrows rained down on the bandits. Muskets cracked from hidden perches. For one bewildered moment, I could not tell who was friend, who was foe. But it was clear enough that the men who came for blood now found themselves hunted. I dropped the rifle, scrambled from the wagon. Nathan Cole's little girl, Mary, had been thrown to the dirt when their wagon overturned. Her small arms flailed, her face streaked with blood and dust. I ran, heart bursting, and seized her into my arms. She clung to me with a strength that belied her size, sobbing into my shoulder as another bandit swung his horse toward us. I had no weapon, only my body. I turned, ready to shield her with my flesh, when a tomahawk split the air. The rider gave a sharp cry and toppled, rolling into the dirt. In their towering breath, hot with smoke and dust, stood a man who might as well have been carved of stone. His face was streaked with paint, dark eyes burning like midnight flame, a weapon in each hand. He met my gaze for a heartbeat, long enough for me to know this was no savior from heaven, but neither was he my enemy. Then he turned and cut another bandit from his horse, as easily as a scythe fells wheat. I held Mary tighter, my knees buckling, the weight of the night bearing down until I thought I might shatter. By dawn, it was over. The bandits were gone, scattered like coyotes before fire. The wagons smoldered, twisted into ruin. Of the families who had set out days ago, a third lay dead. I searched the wreckage for my things, Jack's letters, my mother's Bible, the tiny silver brooch my sister gave me before I left Missouri, but there was nothing left to find. My horse was gone, the wagon reduced to ash. I had nothing but the clothes on my back and the ache of Mary's blood drying against my sleeve. We buried the dead in shallow ground. Stones heaped quick to keep off scavengers. Faces I had known for only days, but would never forget. The others spoke in hushed tones, their eyes sliding toward me with something darker than pity. "Bad luck," I heard one whisper. "Death follows her." By noon, when Nathan Cole told me there was no room left in any wagon, I knew what they wanted, for me to walk, to fall behind. To vanish into the desert with the ghosts, I walked. Dust rose around my skirts, the sun blistered my shoulders, and each step drove pain into my blistered heels. Hours passed. The wagons pulled farther and farther, until they were nothing but moving dots, until they vanished altogether. My legs buckled. I dropped to my knees, the dirt clawing my throat with thirst. I thought of Jack, and for the first time since burying him. I prayed for death, but the desert had other plans. The sandstorm came like a wall of demons, roaring from the north, swallowing the sky. I covered my face with my shawl, tried to crawl into the dirt itself, but the storm lifted me, flung grit into my mouth and eyes. I choked, curled into a ball, waiting to be erased, and then hands. Rough, strong, insistent. They dragged me upright. I fought, weak as I was, striking with fists that landed like feathers. A voice cut through the storm, low and steady. "Storm kill you. Come." I knew that voice. Knew the iron steadiness of it. He lifted me as though I weighed nothing, set me astride a horse broad and powerful beneath me. I gasped, tried to protest, but his arms came around. A blanket wrapped over us both. His chest was a wall at my back, hard and unyielding, but warm. In that impossible storm, I closed my eyes and gave myself up. I woke to the scent of sage and wood smoke. The world was dim, the air thick with the murmur of voices I didn't understand. My body ached, my lips cracked with thirst, but I was alive. When I opened my eyes, I was inside a domed shelter of bent saplings covered with hides. Furs cushioned me, water waited in a clay pot. I reached for it with shaking hands, drank as if the earth itself poured down my throat. The flap lifted. A woman entered doled, her face mapped with lines, her hair in 2 silver braids bound with beads. Her gaze was sharp as any hawk's. She pointed to the water. "Good," she said in accented English. "Drink more. You live." "Where am I?" I whispered, "Camp of Chief Red Bear. My name Moon Elder. Nephew bring you, your nephew." The flap lifted again. He stepped in. The warrior from the storm, from the battle. Taller than any man I had known, his shoulders broad, his arms marked by scars that told stories in silence. His eyes locked on mine, unreadable. For a moment, the breath left me entirely. "This him," Moon Elder said. "Iron Hawk." The name fit like prophecy. He said nothing, only stood there as if waiting for judgment. But judgment was not mine to give. It was theirs, the people gathering outside, voices raised in argument. Some wanted me gone, others worse. I caught only fragments, translated by Moon Elder. I was danger. White woman brought soldiers. White woman brought death. But one voice, deeper than the rest, spoke of an old law. A woman who slept against a man's chest through the storm, without ropes, without force, had chosen. By their law, I was his wife. My protest fell like water on stone. I begged, insisted, pleaded that I hadn't chosen, that I had been half dead. But the shaman, ghost seer, spoke, and when he raised his staff, silence fell. "Spirits chose," Moon Elder said quietly. "Old law say so." My chest tightened until I could not breathe. Wife to him. To this stranger whose eyes pierced me like flame, I wanted to cry, to shout, to flee, but my legs shook too badly to stand. "There is test," Moon Elder added. 7 days. You refuse him. No food, no water from his hand, no shelter, no protection. You survive? You free? 7 days in this desert, refusing the only man strong enough to keep me alive? It might as well have been a sentence of death. But I nodded, because what else could I do? That night, while the camp settled into silence, I lay awake on the furs, the pendant at my throat burned away with grief. My heart thrumming like a trapped bird. Through the thin hide wall, I could hear the men singing, the coyotes answering. I wondered if Jack would know me now. This woman branded by another people's law, caught between 2 worlds, belonging to none. Yet somewhere in that dark, a thought pierced through. If the spirits had chosen, what had they seen? Why him? Why me? Why now, when all I wanted was to vanish with the dead? The answer came not in words, but in the sound of Iron Hawk's breathing outside the shelter. Steady, patient, eternal as stone, and so my new life began. Not with a kiss, not with vows, but with chains invisible, binding me to a man whose heart was hidden in silence. I did not know then that he carried a grief as fierce as my own. I did not know that fate would test us with drought, with betrayal, with blood spilled across canyon stone. All I knew was that I was alive, an unwilling bride to an Apache warrior whose eyes burned with storms, and I would either break against him or burn beside him. I had thought the worst was behind me after the storm, after the 7 days that left me raw with hunger and shame, but I learned soon enough the desert was never done testing a soul. It seemed each time I found a fragile thread of belonging, something rose up to tear it loose. That was the way of the frontier. Mercy came rarely, and love, if it came at all, was wrapped in barbed wire. When Samuel Carter rode into camp, dust on his boots and arrogance in his eyes, the air grew taut as a drawn bowstring. He was Jack's cousin, though little in him reminded me of the man I once called husband. Samuel carried himself like a man who owned the earth beneath his feet, who believed blood ties gave him a right over me. His voice carried across the circle, sharp and insistent. "Eliza, you poor girl, I've come to save you from these savages." I felt the tribe stiffen around me. The Apache women stood back, faces hard, their children clinging at their skirts. Warriors shifted their stance, hands at weapons. An iron hawk. He was still as stone, but his eyes burned into me. This was the moment. I could walk back to the world I had once called mine, be reclaimed by white hands that saw me as possession. Or I could speak the truth that had been growing in me like a slow fire since the sandstorm. "I'm not leaving," I said, my voice steady, though my heart thundered. "I stay. I am Ironhawk's wife, by choice." The words fell like sparks onto dry brush. Gasps rippled through both camps. Samuel's face twisted, half shock, half fury. "You've lost your mind," he spat. "You're bewitched. I'll drag you home myself if I must." He lunged, his hand closing on my arm, but before I could cry out, Ironhawk moved. The world blurred. Steel flashed, the crack of pistols splitting the sky. Dust kicked high as the two men circled, gunfire echoing off the canyon walls. My breath caught in my throat, torn between terror and awe. Samuel's rage was wild, clumsy, but Ironhawk fought with the calm of a man who knew death well, who carried it like a silent shadow. A bullet tore Samuel's sleeve. Another ricocheted off stone near my feet. Warriors shouted, women screamed. The canyon became a crucible of violence. And then it was done. Samuel stumbled back, blood streaking his cheek, his pistol empty. Ironhawk stood unbroken, his chest rising slow and steady. Samuel cursed, swore vengeance with spittle on his lips, and retreated with his hired guns into the dust, leaving me trembling in the silence he'd ripped apart. That night, the camp gathered around the fire, the glow licking across faces hardened by years of loss. Chief Red Bear spoke of law, of the need to honor both spirit and survival. A true marriage would bind not only me and Ironhawk, but to worlds that forever looked at each other with suspicion. It would not erase danger, but it might give it form. Ghost Seer nodded, his staff casting long shadows, and the people murmured in agreement. My hands shook as I listened, yet a strange calm spread through me. If fate had brought me here, then I would not walk half measures. "Yes," I said. "I will stand as wife in your way and mine." The days that followed unfolded like a fever dream. Ironhawk vanished into the wilderness, fasting, praying, seeking vision among the red rocks. I feared he might never return. But at dawn on the third day, I saw him on the ridge, thin from hunger yet burning with a strange fire in his eyes. He carried with him a necklace of turquoise and shell, strung with fetishes older than memory. "For you," he said simply, placing it in my palm. "Spirits say it waited for a woman who bridges worlds." At sunset, the people gathered. Drums throbbed like a heartbeat, the fire roared tall, stars prickled the darkening sky. My dress was sewn with tin cones that sang with each step. I entered from the east, Ironhawk from the west, and we met at the flames. For times we circled, hand in hand, our voices trembling as we spoke vows in both tongues. His words carried the strength of mountains, mine the fragile tremor of a river breaking free of ice. Hostile stars looked down, but I felt them soften, just a little. When the last prayer rose into the night, I thought perhaps the world might let us breathe. But peace is a stranger in the Canyonlands. 5 days later, the soldiers came. We heard them first, the thunder of hooves, the grind of iron wheels, the sharp crack of cannon fire that shattered the silence. The canyon walls lit with blasts, earth raining down, children screaming. Colonel Wade's voice boomed from the rim, promising mercy if I were surrendered. "Give us the woman," he declared, "and your women and children may go free." The camp was thrown into fury. Some begged me to leave, to save their families. Others swore no Apache blood would be traded for mine. My heart clenched. I would have walked into their camp willingly if it meant sparing the innocent, but Ironhawk's grip was iron on my wrist. "No," he growled. "You are my wife. We do not trade our own." Ghost Seer stepped forward, his eyes glinting with a cunning light. "Then let us give them what they hunger to see," he said. "Dead warriors, captive woman. Victory for their pride, freedom for our breath." He spoke of medicine that would slow the heart, feigning death. Warriors volunteered, grim yet steady. I trembled as he turned to me. "And you, white woman, you must fight your husband, strike him, scream, make them believe. Can you?" I wanted to say no. I wanted to cling to Ironhawk, to refuse the charade. But his eyes met mine, dark and unwavering. "Do it," he said, "or all is lost." So I did. When soldiers poured into the canyon, I screamed, struck at Ironhawk, fought with all the fury of a cornered woman. He held me as though I was a wild thing, then fell limp to the ground, his chest still, his breath hidden. I bit back the sob that rose like fire in my throat. Soldiers cheered, swarmed around me, and I let them. They dragged me from the dust, praising their own triumph, while behind me lay the bodies of men who would wake again under starlight. At Fort Stanton, they treated me like fragile glass, draping me in calico, feeding me until my stomach cramped. The colonel's wife tutted over my hair, brushed it smooth, spoke of sending me west to family. I smiled, nodded, played the part of the broken captive. But under my dress, hidden close to my skin, Ironhawk's turquoise pendant pressed against my heart. A secret vow. A promise. The night came when the fort erupted. Horses shrieked, soldiers shouted, shadows slipped like smoke between the barracks. I lay still until the flap of my tent lifted and a hand seized mine. Ironhawk's eyes glowed fierce in the dark. He pulled me into the chaos, his grip steady as the stars themselves. Together, we vanished into desert night, the fort behind us in uproar. But freedom was no gentle gift. Word spread swift across the territory, posters nailed to saloon doors, nailed to posts in every town. My face sketched in black ink. Kidnapped woman, reward for rescue. Men smelled blood and gold, and the chase began. Days later, at a narrow pass, the hunters found us. U.S. scouts with rifles leveled, shouting for surrender. The canyon walls offered no escape. Ironhawk drew his gun, and before I could plead, the world became a storm of lead and smoke. I dropped behind rock, ears ringing, heart pounding. Black Wolf, who had hated me, who had called me curse, charged into the hail of bullets. His shots rang true, his body shielded ours. I screamed when I saw him fall, but his last look was not of hate, it was of grim defiance, as if to say, my life had become worth his death. We buried him quickly, no time for mourning. The soldiers would be back, and others too, men hungry for coin. Word reached us of families torn from the canyon, driven to San Carlos's reservation, where sickness bred in crowded huts. Others scattered into Mexico, ghosts fading into mountains. And so it was decided. I would lead the women and children west, toward my brother's ranch in California. Ironhawk would ride with the warriors to cover our flight. The parting was bitter as gall. He pressed the map into my hand, his thumb brushing my wrist. "I will find you," he vowed. Next full moon. I wanted to believe him, yet my chest ached with fear. For days I led them women with weary eyes, children too young to understand exile. We drank from muddy springs, hid from patrols, shared scraps of food with trembling hands. Each night I told them stories, anything to keep hope alive, tales of rivers that never dried, of mountains where rain fell like blessings. They listened, and in their eyes I saw the flicker of faith, fragile but real. At last, under the Sierra pines, rain began to fall. It drummed soft on my shoulders, cool and sweet, washing dust from my face. I lifted my eyes to the sky, and there he was. Iron Hawk, riding from the trees, thinner, scarred, but alive. Behind him came the warriors, fewer than before, yet unbroken. I ran to him, and when his arms closed around me, I knew the desert had given back what it once tried to take. Around us, women and children gathered, my brother's land rising behind like a promise. We stood in the rain, a fragile family between two worlds, daring to believe in something new. And in that moment, for the first time since Jack's death, I understood survival was not enough. We had to build, to love, to defy the hate that hunted us. The storm had carried me here, to this man, this people, this new life, and I would not let go.